I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broken, but I'm keeping on.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dove Tusman. We're out of studio tonight. Again, we're in the western part of the U.S., and beautiful snow-capped peaks of the Rockies. Last week, we talked about the psychological and emotional impact of the Israeli-Gazan war on young adults, Jewish young adults in North America. One caller that called in last week was really getting into it with us about the appropriateness, or maybe the lack of appropriateness, of talking to teens on the air, with the implication that really this is a forum and this network and the issues that we cover as a Jewish show, but also as a show that looks at lots of issues, psychological, mental health, sociological, political, through the prism of Jewish wisdom, not just for Jewish listeners, but the implication again being that it's an adult forum, that there isn't really a place for young adult voices. This week, we're not talking to teens, we're talking to adults. We're talking to adults that are reflecting on their recent experience as teens. And I have to say, I couldn't disagree more with last week's caller. I think the freshest and most important voices we hear from on this show are teens and young adults who are wrestling with issues that are really unique to our current existence, weren't around even a few decades ago, around social media, around travel, around the inputs that we get in our daily life, but again, in the context of Jewish community. We can't shy away from these topics. I think we need to instead lean into them. Tonight, we're going to lean into one of the more difficult topics that faces not just Jewish families, but families from all backgrounds, and that is once again looking at the issue of addiction, looking at the issue of intervention in the life of a young person who is dealing with probably the biggest challenge so far in their lives, whether it's addiction to substance abuse, whether it's a mental health crisis, something that is traumatic, that draws them out of the quote-unquote normal, as much as I hate that word, the normal course, if you will, of their lives, and requires special attention, requires special love, requires a form of intervention. The most enlightened young people going through these, and I shouldn't even say young, the most enlightened people going through these types of life crises reach out for help. Many go through rehab. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. Unfortunately, not everyone knows there is a lifeline, whether it's rehab or community support or other forms, other modalities of recovery. The important thing is to know that we're not alone. We're not alone as people that are going through crisis. We're not alone as families kind of coping with that reality and trying to get a grip on what is the right path forward. We have a couple of brave individuals on the show tonight to help walk us through this, that are going to open up about their personal journeys through addiction and recovery, through mental health crisis and rehab. I give so much respect to them for being open and wanting to help others that, again, may feel unaccompanied in their own crisis. So these are two individuals that have been on the show before, and we've touched in their journey. We've touched in shows before on their journeys, but now we're looking at it head on. Ray Klein Ray was born and raised in New York. She grew up in Muncie. She's an entrepreneur now. Her and her fiance do various business projects together. She also, during the winter, is a ski instructor. My bet is she just got off the slopes a couple hours ago. Ray loves her two dogs. Obviously, her fiance, she struggled as a teen with mental health, and her parents decided to send her to a mental health rehab facility. And she's here tonight sharing that journey. Ray, welcome to the show again.
Hello, thanks for having me once again.
Ray, you're joined by Yossi Bankhalter. Yossi, or Yosef Bankhalter, is 22. Ray, you are, remind me, 23?
24.
24. Yossi's 22. He lives partly in your area in Muncie and partly in Manhattan. He grew up in Manhattan. His parents divorced when he was 11. He grew up in a Chabad Lubavitcher home. And Yossi, in his own words, struggled his whole life feeling alone and scared and confused in a world where he often felt like he didn't fit in. And that suffering got so bad that he chose to get help, and we're going to hear about what that was about for him. He went to rehab in June of last year. He was there for 5 months, and he's now been sober for 8 months. And he's living and helping other young people navigate crises in their lives and acting as a teen mentor. He's also acting as a para in Chabad Lubavitch School. Yossi, welcome back to Equal Footing.
Thank you. It's good to be here again.
Can I ask you guys an odd question? I don't think I've ever asked this kind of starting a show. I'm very nervous for this show because I know both of you. I care for both of you very deeply. And there are questions that I want to ask, but I don't want to step on toes. And I'm wondering, how's your nervousness level? How are you guys doing? Is it something that you're excited to talk about and share with others and help others, or are you feeling the same kind of knot in your chest that I am?
Definitely nervous, but if my experience I went through can help anyone out there, then it's all worth it.
So I feel a little nervous as well, but I'm just trying to embrace it and kind of use the opportunity to be vulnerable and just raw and real. So I think that's a great question to start off with.
Well, Yossi, you gave me the opening. You guys are helping me feel more comfortable. Can you describe briefly what was the tipping point? What was the tipping point of your mental health crisis as you went through your addiction that led you to the decision? I assume it was your decision, but the decision to go to a rehab facility. What got you there?
Yeah, is this for me? Sorry.
Yeah, let's start with you, Yossi.
Okay. Good question. Wow. It's like that word rehab, when you're not, before you go, you don't really know what it is. And there's like the stigma around it. It's almost like a fear of mine when I was younger, like ever actually needing help in this way. It was like, am I one of those crazy people, But yeah, my life, the way I was living for years, honestly, a way of like coping and trying to be okay, trying to breathe in such a distorted way. At some point, you hit a wall, and you need to you can't live that way anymore, right? Like the famous term, like the 12 steps, like our lives have become unmanageable. So that I really felt that way, and not necessarily. Do I feel it's directly connected with the addiction itself? I feel more that the addiction was a manifestation of me feeling so that my life is so unmanageable, so unbearable to just live, to just be a person, to just have normal relationships, to just have normal friendships, to just feel okay. I hardly ever feel okay, And it got to a certain point where the darkness was so bad that I understood that there's no other choice. I was using simply to just breathe, to just have a moment where the pain wasn't there. And my mom brought it up as an idea. Obviously, I wasn't forced. I was 21 years old, and I decided that I needed to do it. And I also had a certain pride, like, if I can take that step and to actually deal with the issues that I have, and hopefully one day I can be the person that I want to be. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers a lot. Just so folks understand the background that you were coming from in your family, I referred to that a little bit at the outset. You have many, many brothers and sisters. You come from a very large family. And did you feel, were there other voices amongst your siblings? You're one of the older siblings, but amongst your siblings or other voices in your family that were encouraging you to get outside help? Or was it primarily your mother?
It was primarily my mother. Honestly, my older sister, she, as well. I'm very close with her. But it was, I don't think they ever mentioned necessarily rehab. They always were like, hey, listen, maybe you just need to, like, let go of trying to, like, go through maybe the yeshiva system or just trying to move from this school to that school. If I only move to Florida, then I'll feel better. If I only do this, or if I only do this treatment or ketamine treatment, or if I just, and like, at some point, none of this was working. And my mom brought it up and mentioned it a few times and worked very, very hard to, figure out how to cover the costs and stuff like that. And I knew that I had no other option at that point. It was just like, there was nothing I was doing worked, yeah.
Ray, how about you? Your situation is a little bit different in that I think you went into rehab earlier in life, and if I understand correctly from some of our pregame discussions, your parents really kind of put you there as opposed to it being your own choice. Do I have that right?
At the end of the day, it was my choice, but my parents recommended it and were kind of pushing for it, and like talking about a lot and trying to bring my life around it in a way of like, oh, this is going to change you. This is going to make your life so much better. I was in a really dark and unhealthy place using really unhealthy coping skills at that point. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, it can't make my life much worse, so let's give it a shot.
How old were you when you went into rehab?
18.
18. Now, both of you guys, Yossi has more siblings than you do. You both have a number of siblings. Did you? Same question I had for Yossi. Was there a primary single agent in your family that was encouraging this to happen, or were there a number of different voices around you that were encouraging you to go that direction?
So in my family, I didn't really have a close relationship with any of my older siblings as well as my dad. My mom was the main factor in recommending it. And I think she was actually consulting in a rabbi or something at that point who was like, we'd like send her, we'll get her away from all like the bad people around she's hanging out with and all that. But I think my mom was the main factor, and then I met with the person running this facility who was also like trying to push me and telling me all good things and lying to me about certain things to make me want to go there.
Now, we're going to need to take our first break in a second, but I just want to clarify. Both of you were in rehab programs that were primarily oriented towards the Jewish community. So either everybody with you was Jewish, or the vast majority of the people in that rehab program were Jewish. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like kosher food and all that. But it was mixed, and there was people that were in the residential as well that weren't Jewish. But it was like advertised as a Jewish rehab.
Got it. Well, guys, we're here with Yossi Bankhalter and Ray Klein. These are two brave young adults who, either in their late teens or early 20s, ultimately put themselves through rehab programs because they were in a dark, unhealthy place. And After the break, we're going to get into a little bit more of their journey. And Ray and Yossi, really appreciate your being open. I hope others that are listening will also feel the bravery to be open. I know it's a really difficult subject to talk about, and you're welcome to do so anonymously. You can call in. I will say that if you call, since we're out of studio tonight, please be patient. Let the phone ring and ring and ring until our radio engineer, Dimitri, picks you up, because we're all remote. That's 718-303-9090. That's if you want to call. You don't have to say your name, or you can if you want, and talk about your story or ask a question. Maybe you're a parent who wants to understand how to better handle this type of situation. Again, 718-303-9090. I am going to give out another number, and this is a number to text or WhatsApp in the comment or question. You can do that totally anonymously, or again, you can mention your name. This is not for being on the air. Don't call this number, just for sending in a text message. That's 917-428-4062, 917-428-4062, and we'll be right back.
No pain inside, you're my protection. But how do I feel this good sober? I don't want to be the girl that has to feel the silence.
Equal Footing is brought to you as usual in part by Mechanical Art Capital. Mechanical Art Capital is about getting you money if you are a watch dealer or a watch collector or a jewelry dealer. You can get money overnight, max 2 days, and it's halachically sound. It is not a loan. It's a buyback program. You can get financing at very reasonable rates, practically overnight. How do you do it? On your smartphone, type in your app store 3 separate words: Mechanical Art Capital. You upload, once you download that app, you just upload some photos or videos, you get an appraisal very quickly, and you can get money again as early as the next day. It is super easy. You can also go online to mechanicalartcapital.com and get overnight financing for your watch collection or your watch inventory if you're a watch dealer.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. I've been taught, but I'm keeping on.
All right, you're back on Equal Footing, and we're here with Ray Klein and Yossi Bankalter, and we're talking about the recovery path. It's one that has peaks and valleys. As anybody who has been through any kind of trauma and recovery, whether it has to do with addiction and substance abuse, a mental health crisis, rape, any type of trauma in your life, you know that the recovery process is long. It can be painful. There are setbacks, but it is so important to be surrounded by voices of hope and people that have gone through it as well. These are 2 brave individuals here with us tonight who have done that. I want to read some stats here quickly. Anybody who's listened to the show over the years knows that I'm enamored with statistics. I think they help frame the issue. In the United States, by the 8th grade, over half of adolescents have consumed significant alcohol, about over 40% cigarettes, and well over 20% have used marijuana. That is by the 8th grade. There are indicators in a variety of different studies that show that by the 11th grade, something related to substance abuse is affecting over half of families that have teens in the household. Now, that doesn't mean that there's a teen in the household who is wrestling with substance abuse, but it does mean it's touching their lives directly, either directly in the family or in the extended family or in the close friend group. This is an issue that is touching your family almost certainly if you have teens, whether you know it or not as a parent. And as young adults, we often wait too long to get help. So there are resources out there. We're talking about some of those resources tonight. Now, if you think this issue doesn't affect the Jewish community or the observant Jewish community as much, you are dead wrong. The limited studies show that, if anything, there are greater indices of substance abuse and mental health crisis with observant Jewish teens than there is in society at large. And my personal opinion, partly informed by some of the research we've done prior to this show, and partly intuitive, and I want to bounce this off you, Yossi and Ray, is that young people in the observant Jewish world don't feel like they have as much opportunity to talk about it. There aren't as many places to go. There aren't as many people in the family that are willing to be resources about it, and it becomes more taboo. And yet, if we're really honest with ourselves, for example, alcohol is a relatively central part of observant Jewish life. It's something that often observant Jewish teens get exposed to earlier in the home than folks from outside the community. And it's well documented that there is a higher index of marijuana and psychedelic use as well. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just these are issues that do affect this community in equal or greater forms in society at large. I think it's really important to say that clearly without ifs, ands, or buts, and without asterisks, because often what happens when we cover these types of topics is that people tune out. Oh, that's a secular problem. Oh, that's a very limited issue. That's a communication issue. That's because the family's doing something wrong. No. This is a communal issue that we should be openly talking about. Ray, what do you think about what I just said? Do you agree with my assessment around why these issues are as prevalent or even more prevalent in the observant Jewish community than society at large? Do you think I have it wrong?
1,000%. I started spiking my regular sodas and drinking alcohol throughout the week when I was 14, 15 years old. From a young kid, I was always drinking on the weekends, where first it started with just regular for kiddush, and then throughout the meal or on the weekends, I would take like a little bit of whiskey, drink my dad's cup and stuff, but then I started liking the feeling of it. So for alcohol-wise, I'm definitely with you. I was drinking, and then as I got older, became pretty much, I wouldn't say flat alcoholic, but I feel like drinking 5 times a week, 4 shots of alcohol a night is a lot. And then when it comes to marijuana, that's when my parents started realizing, let's send her away and all that, was when I started smoking weed. But when I was drinking alcohol, it was just like, oh, okay, so alcohol, But they weren't making such a big deal out of it when I was just drinking.
Yossi, what do you think? What do you think about my assessment around why these issues seem to be as or more prevalent in the frum communities than at large?
I don't fully know. I know that it's different for each family. There's different sects within Judaism, and I know that there is even families, I would say, that one would say are a very healthy family, where yet the kid still finds himself struggling with addiction. It could be like a thing that has to do with maybe, as you said, there's this feeling of like something that can't be spoken about, maybe a feeling of shame. But I don't fully understand. I can speak to you from my experience, I don't fully have the answer.
I have an interesting, and I'm going to lay off the stats because if I don't, our producer will kick me, push me to the next subject. But I do want to read one more, some stats from one more study. It's probably the most comprehensive study that's been done on alcohol and substance abuse in the observant Jewish community. It was published a couple of years ago by a professor from the University of Winnipeg, with support of several other researchers. A multi-year study. 2 things really jumped out at me here. And Yossi, to this last comment, interested in your response. One is that people that self-denominate, that qualify themselves as observant Jews, are almost twice as likely to blame the addict. In other words, to say that it is the person who has a substance abuse issue, to say it's their fault. They're more than twice as likely as society at large, as opposed to blaming, either not blaming or saying there was a community influence or other issues around. That's Let me pause there. Does that feel resonant with your experience?
It's interesting to say that. Maybe a little bit, and I think that you make a good point with that. I think that it could be due to I think people use Torah and maybe Judaism or religion almost as a means to not deal with issues that need to be dealt with, and it can almost be put under the rug in that sense. And underneath, there could be a lot of sickness and pain and suffering really going on. I know that exists in a lot of communities, and my community as well, where it almost feels like to deal with your emotions or your feelings, or to be honest, or to be a little more open and receptive and vulnerable is almost seen as something that's shameful or not in the Torah way. And I think that's totally untrue. That's not the Torah way at all. So I think there's a lot of pain and trauma that exists in the Jewish community for thousands of years. That's what I got.
Ray, let me bounce this off you as well. From the same study from this group at the University of Winnipeg, it showed that in the general population, if you ask an adult whether they have known or know someone who is an alcoholic, almost 80% of people will say that they do. They do know someone who's an alcoholic or someone who has struggled with alcoholism in the past. In the observant Jewish community in North America, that number is less than 20%. I found that shocking. So, to Yossi's point, it seems that there's just a lack of acknowledgement. Now, one explanation could be, well, there are just fewer alcoholics in the observant community, but the stats show that it's a very similar percentage. So, does that resonate you, this kind of almost like a refusal to acknowledge the issue?
Definitely. If you ask me, I can start listing plenty of alcoholics I know just offhand without even thinking deeply. But I think people don't refer to themselves as alcoholics. More like, oh, I'm drinking because of this thing I'm celebrating or something. More it's an excuse than...
Yossi, you brought up how we can sometimes use Torah as an excuse to not delve into difficult topics, and that's part of the reason why we've done this show in the first place. And we're not pretending to do a show on halacha tonight, anything but. This is about personal experiences. I do want to ask about the perspective that we've heard on the show before sometimes in that regard, that is around the kind of responsibility for your body and the Jewish concept that your body is really not your own property, but it belongs to God. It belongs to Hashem. And I'm wondering if you were brought up with that kind of that belief, and how that's affected your relationship, how that's affected your recovery path.
Sorry, just to clarify, you want to know how the value of mental health and my physical body and that my body's not mine, how that directly, you're saying that I did receive that from my family? Is that what you're implying?
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was a part of your upbringing and if that helped or hurt your recovery path.
Yeah. So I definitely did, both my parents didn't grow up religious. I don't know if that's just, so there was less of that sort of extreme way, but I was definitely taught that, but there's difference being taught that and actually experiencing that in the actual relationships and the family dynamic and in my parents' relationship. So I feel that we have to actually internalize that and live that way in order for us to really have that effect on our life. And I just want to say as well, I think that Torah can be used as another addiction as well. It talks about in the book, that even, very religious people are drinking, and as Ray said, very well, that people will use religion or use excuses as to why they're drinking. And in truth, a lot of times I feel that people need to almost drop this sort of religion that they're using as an addiction in order to actually find God. You know, as like I heard this song once said, like, unfortunate that for a lot of observant Jews, not they find God for the first time in a church basement. Not to put down a church or anything. I'm simply saying that it's funny how growing up in a way that we talk about God the whole entire day, and people are even using God sometimes to not deal with their own issues. It's almost like the opposite of what God actually is. So there's that, yeah.
Ray, how is your relationship with God and religion changed as a result of your rehab and recovery process?
So in the beginning, when I was younger and starting to find my own path, I would say, I really did not have a good connection at all. Just the opposite. I was kind of mad and angry at how people would lie in the name of God and just make up stories, as in school they would say certain things with halacha when it wasn't. It was just their way of wanting us to dress or be, and they would put it in the name of God, and I was just, if that's a lie, what else that they're telling me or think is a lie? But at this point in my life, I found my God and my path, and I have much more of a relationship, seeing the actual truth and not just what they want you to see, what they want you to tell you. But yeah, so at this point in my life, I have a very good connection. But then when I was just being told everything and lied to in the name of God, at that point, I really didn't have a connection at all, and I was just angry.
Well, I've had a similar experience, Ray, in my life, that it's crisis that's brought me closer to a real relationship with Hashem, and ultimately that's been a beautiful outcome. We'll be right back on Equal Footing. We're talking about rehab and recovery and substance abuse with a focus on the observant Jewish community. We're here with Ray Klein and Yossi Bankalter, and you're on Equal Footing.
They try to make me go to rehab. I won't go. I'd rather be at home with Ray.
Equal Footing with Dove Tusman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You could even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check.
All right, you're back on Equal Footing, and we'll get to at least one caller who's been patiently waiting. Ray, what about your rehab experience worked and what didn't?
So starting with what really didn't work was, first of all, starting off my rehab process with seeing stuff to get me into a rehab. And then once I was in rehab, it was like, oh no, that's not happening. You're in here. We're in control. You're signed over to us until we feel it's good for you to get out, as well as not having any communication with the outside world or my parents being able to be part of my healing journey, since if I talk to my parents, they might trigger something in me, or any of my friends or anyone or my partner at that point was talking to me or might have been part of anything, then it would bring me back to some bad memory or something I was cut off, and my parents were completely cut off from how I was doing or like anything that was going on, or anything part of.
I don't mean to interrupt the flow too much, but I just want to understand that clearly. You were like not allowed to talk to your parents or your family members. They were not allowed to contact you.
Yeah. And when my mom sent me letters, they would keep the letters and not give it to me. So we didn't have any touch with the outside world.
And that did not work for you?
Not at all. I was frustrated to a certain extent because we were told, let's say, oh, you have a 72-hour notice to get out of here. If you really want to leave, it's not working for you. But that 72 hours never worked. Anytime you gave it, they're like, oh, but you're too unhealthy and no other place will accept you. And I was never able to confide and tell my mom, this place isn't working. It's not for me. Just the opposite. My mom would call in to see how I'm doing, and they would just say, oh, she's doing great. She's doing fine. And I was having the worst experience of my life. And things that did work was we had equine therapy over there and just the connecting with animals and getting away from just the chaos that was going on there. That was the only good thing I can say that was in the rehab I went to. But everything overall, it even went to a certain extent where I didn't have a therapist at all. I was just waiting for the day for Middle East to come. And also,
Ray, I want to get into like the post-rehab experience, but I just want listeners to understand, technically, in a sense, what were you admitted to rehab for?
My parents didn't like the fact that I was smoking weed and hanging around a crowd that they called, quote-unquote, bad people, bad influence. I say, no one can influence you if you don't want to be influenced. And I think that they thought that if they take me away from that crowd and I'll change somehow in rehab and I'll come back and I'll be a completely new person. But just the opposite, I came out with more experience towards like drugs and stuff, and in a way worse place than I was when I went in.
Oh, wow. We'll get to that in a minute. Yossi, in your experience in rehab, what worked and what didn't?
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that what Ray had to go through at rehab. That's very interesting to hear. It's hard to hear. My experience wasn't exactly like that. I felt more of a positive experience. They did let me call my parents. My parents send letters. My parents got to visit me to do family therapy. Although I know people that went to the same rehab as I did and say the opposite and say that they weren't nice. And so I feel for me personally that I had a good experience. There were some people I connected with more than others in regards to like therapists or people that worked there or techs that worked there at the home. But I think that because it was like, for me, like there was no other option almost, and I'd never been to a rehab before. So I couldn't compare it to what I didn't feel I was being like, it was abuse or anything like that. And I feel like it was a positive experience overall for me, taking advantage of what they offered there, going to 12-step meetings and the group therapy and the trauma therapists. So yeah, overall it was a good experience.
Were most of the people that were in the rehab program with you, Yossi, there voluntarily like yourself, or were there also a number of people that were kind of admitted by family, if not against their will, then in a way that wasn't totally voluntary?
So I don't know 100%, but from what I know is I think that most people, I think it was like voluntarily, but like no other option almost, So what does voluntarily really mean? There was a few people there. They were there on drug court, like they were, made to go to rehab from a judge due to legal situations. And there were some people there like me that decided to go because they had no other option. Life was getting that bad. And then I think there's as well some people that their parents forced them. Those were more people like a few years younger than me. Yeah.
How about you, Ray? Were most of your colleagues in that program there truly voluntarily, or was it a mix, as Yossi is describing?
Kind of like this is describing. Some people came and it was like either this place or they were going to somewhere harsher, or one person who was a minor actually, her parents were like threatening her, was trying to go to different places, or she was having a really hard time at home where she was down to get out of the house. But the problem is we had a few minors there that once they were in the program and they realized how crazy things were going and their parents were super religious and didn't want them at home and they signed them over to the program, they weren't able to do anything. They didn't have a 72 hours notice or anything. They weren't able to do anything at all to get out, and their parents didn't have contact with them. So they were stuck there without any words or being able to do anything of themselves because they were signed over to the program.
I want to ask you guys one more question before we go to break, and then I promise this caller who's been waiting, if they're still there, that we'll get to him right after the break. After your rehab experience, now, Ray, you've been out of that experience for some years now, whereas Yossi, I think, if I understand it, it's only been several months. You talked about what I'm going to call relapse. What has been your journey since, and are you now in a healthy, sober place in your life? And that question's for you, Ray. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, 6 years later, I am really happy with the place I'm in. But for 2 to 3 years coming out of that place were hell. Really hard. I had quite a few hospitalizations, was in an outpatient program, 2 different outpatient programs in Manhattan, a DBT program. I was going through a lot, really depressed, and they put me on a lot of medication. So I was like in a zombie a lot of times, and I turned to a lot of drugs that I learned more about in rehab. I had addiction with cocaine. I was going through a really hard time coming out of there, and because I came out of there in a really weird way, they completely cut me off. They never checked in to see if I was doing well or anything, and they never wanted to really share information of what happened there. So between the journey from there till today, it was kind of rough, but I'm really thankful for where I'm at today.
If you, oh gosh, I really want to ask you guys advice to parents out there, because we have several questions that have come in and comments from parents. But I think we're going to do that after the break. I really appreciate Yossi and Ray, you guys being so open about this. And if you could, over this next little ad break, think about that advice from the heart that you would give to the loved ones of young people that are struggling. Because from your stories, it sounds like it's a very difficult balance to strike of how involved to be, whether to intervene, whether to push, and then how to interact with that person after they get out of rehab. So we'll be right back on Equal Footing. I'm going to give just this time the text or WhatsApp number one last time if you want to send in a question or comment, and we will get to some of those right after this last break. 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062 to text or WhatsApp in a question or comment. We'll be right back on Equal Footing.
They say she's in the class 18, stuck in her daydream. Been this way since 18, but lately her face seems slowly sinking, wasting, crumbling like pastries. They scream.
Oh, great music selection tonight. Kudos to Leah. All right. Equal Footing, as you know from tonight's program and in general, is about tackling the tough stuff without shame and with an open mind through the prism of our beautiful Jewish community. Manhattan Medical is a sponsor that understands this ethos because Manhattan Medical Associates deals with a very difficult issue that affects the emotional well-being of couples. and that is erectile dysfunction. It's not something to be ashamed about or laugh about. It affects almost 2/3 of men in their lifetimes at various ages, and there are solutions out there. Importantly, Manhattan Medical realizes that there are solutions for erectile dysfunction that do not depend on those expensive blue pills. Those remedies are not available to a lot of people because of comorbidities and side effects. So Manhattan Medical uses an effective ED therapy that is non-invasive, surgery-free, painless, and involves no side effects. It's called Gainswave therapy. And Manhattan Medical has been using Gainswave therapy in the community for many years and understands the particular needs of the Jewish community. Whether you're Jewish or not, find out about Manhattan Medical's ED treatment Gainswave therapy. You do not have to be in Manhattan or the New York area. Anywhere in the United States, you can get a consultation. And if you mention, get ready because I'm going to give you the phone number. If you mention that you heard about Manhattan Medical's Gainswave therapy on this radio program, on Equal Footing or the Dove Tusman radio program, you will get a free consultation. That's a $250 value. Here's the number for Manhattan Medical's ED therapy. It's 888-ED-CURE-9. That's 888-332-8739. One more time, write it down. Their operators are standing by. Mention you heard about it on Equal Footing, and you get a free consultation. That's a $250 value. 888-332-8739.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been taught, but I'm keeping on check.
All right. Yossi and Ray, I gave you guys a little bit of an assignment, as it were, over this break. And from the heart, without censoring yourself, Yossi, if you could speak to your parents, other loved ones in your life, and in a sense, speak for others, other people that are going through the challenge of substance abuse and rehab, but speak to the loved ones and the other adults around them. What is the best way to support that process?
Yeah, wow. Number one, I would say, is to just love them, to really love them. Now, I think that that's not an easy thing. I think that a lot of times parents try to love their kids, and the kids are not receptive to it, or they push them away. And I'll say like this: I was speaking to someone who was telling me that someone asked him, he's like, "How do I be a good dad?" And he was telling me, he's like, "How are you going to be a good dad if you can't even be yourself?" And I think that a lot of times, that especially with younger teens, that usually the addiction is simply just trying to deal with so much pain, so much of feelings of unsafety, feeling so worthless, feeling so scared. And I think that what a parent can do is try their very best to create an environment for that child to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel comfort, to feel safe, to be able to really be held and be seen and be able to like really express what they're going through. I know in my life, I felt very alone, very, very isolated. I know that a lot of people deal with that. And a lot of parents are like, I want to help my kid. What's wrong with my kid? And I feel like a lot of times a parent, in order to really help their kid, needs to really look at themselves and see, how is my kid not like, how can I really be that parent to my kid that would really help my child? And I think that not simply in the way that of directly what they do for the child, but simply the parent in their own life, how they feel in their own life, I think directly affects the child. I think that addicts are very authentic, very sensitive, so they pick up on things that are, I think they're on toxicity. I think they're allergic to toxicity and need authenticity. And I think that's the whole addiction, really. I know Gabor Mate says that, right, the opposite of addiction is connection. So I think that if we can help addicts connect, if we can connect them in any way, and if they don't want to connect with us, get them connected somewhere. That's just my feeling.
Beautiful. The opposite of addiction is connection. Ray, what advice do you give to parents and other loved ones around someone who's in crisis and facing this issue?
So first of all, agreed so much with what Yossi said. Couldn't have worded it that better. That's 100% all with that. And also, first of all, with any kind of process or journey or rehab or treatment at all, be part of your child's journey. Don't just hand them over to someone professional and be like, okay, take care of my child and figure it out. Be part of it. Be part of every step. Be present. Show that you're not just here, when you feel better and when you're different, then all of a sudden you'll be part of the family. Show them they're part the way they are and they're accepted for who they are and they're not struggling and in this alone. And whatever they're going through, just be up to date with it. And I feel like the hardest part for me was that my parents were just not involved at all, and I felt like I was just going through it all alone with all these professionals, and like they were handing me over to someone to heal me in some way. So whatever they're going through with anyone working to heal or just home with them, just
there's a number of parents who have written in over the last half an hour or so as we've gone on with the show, and I just want to share a couple of comments. One mother from the Philadelphia area wants to say to you, Ray, that you are a brave woman, and it takes a lot of courage and strength to come through what you've gone through. So I just wanted to read that. There's a listener from Los Angeles who I'm going to call Rachel, who's written in anonymous, or I think wants to be anonymous. I'm using a different name. Who said that their learning in the process has been that they need to shut up and listen. Talking about their kids. And I'm hearing that with both of you. It's just be present, non-judgmental, listening without coloring it with your religious advice, how you feel about where they should be in their lives, your kids or a loved one. And I want to share that I had an experience, I've never talked about it in the show, with one of my siblings many, many years ago, decades ago at this point, where we had to do an intervention as a family and kind of pull as the best that we could that loved one out of her spiral, which also involved substance abuse. And that intervention, that stepping forward and knowing that we would perhaps be hated or there would be anger directed at us as family members, was one of the most difficult kind of relationship moments of my life in general, not only with my sister. So I think it's so important to be present, but also courageous and not worry too much about how the relationship is going to evolve as long as we're standing in a place of love. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. All right, let's see if we can get this caller on the line. If we can, I'm going to listen for the cue and see if he's still waiting.
Hello.
All right. Hello, Stan?
Yes, it is. I don't think there's much time, so I'm not going to, I won't answer now because you don't have much time. And what I have to say is interesting. But are these millennials?
What's the definition of millennial? I mean, one is 20.
Are these in their 20s? Are they in their 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
They are the generation that have had it all. They've had it all. And tonight's show is an indictment of parents, of course, to some extent. Maybe it's an indictment of Judaism. But these kids in their 20s have had it all. And somewhere along the line, and I hope they get well. First of all, let me say that. I want you to get well, get the care you need. But they've had it all. No one told them to.
Hang on a second. Stay on the line. Yossi and Ray, I know both of you outside of the show. I do not think that you have had it all, but maybe I have it wrong. Do you feel that way about your lives? Yeah, let's start with you, Yossi.
Absolutely not. First of all, what does that even mean, have it all? Even if I had everything that Stan is talking about physically, if I am wealthy, if I have, what does that mean I have it all?
Can I explain it? You have parents, I assume. Do parents love you? Do you have Go ahead. Go ahead.
Stan, before you explain anything, you just assumed I have it all. You don't know what I have. You don't know where I live.
Do you have parents? All right. Do you have parents?
Yeah, I have parents.
Do they love you? Do they love you?
They do love me, yes.
Okay. So do you talk to them? Do you tell them your innermost sadnesses? Do you speak to them at all?
I speak to them. I don't tell them my innermost sadnesses.
Oh, well, why not? Why not?
Because
that may help the situation.
Stan, do you have children?
No, I do not.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I'm not sorry to hear it. If I was, I would not be in those situations. But the point is, I mean, it can't be just the parents. It can't. I hope you get. Well, I mean that. I want you to go.
No
it
one
can't be the parents.
Yeah, let's hear from Ray for a second. Ray,
go ahead.
Okay.
Ray,
First of all, talking to your parents, the first time I opened up to my parents about hurting and all that, I was shut down, and I was told you're old enough to keep your feelings to yourself, and it is not.
Are they Orthodox? Are they Orthodox?
Yes, Orthodox.
Well, that's a problem. This is also an indictment of the religion to some extent. I agree with you on that. The indictment of the religion. Go ahead.
We're gonna come up on time, so I'm gonna
sure. Let them talk. Go ahead. Let them talk.
It's a valid point. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So they were saying that according to I can't hurt them with my feelings, and my mom was hurt with what I was telling her that was going on in my life, and my father was saying just for dark arts and all that, keep your feelings to yourself, and anything painful or anything like that, and that's how you're going to grow to mature.
That's terrible. That was terrible. That's an indictment of your folks and the religion because they don't want to know about it. I understand that. Absolutely. No, you're right. But, you know, some instances... I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate the point.
Right.
And we're going to come up on time, but
Sure, I'll hang up.
That's part of the reason that we did the show, and is to shine a light on the issues. Now, Yossi, I think you were trying to make a point here, and it's going to have to be the last point before we wrap up. But what were you trying to say to Stan there at the end before you got interrupted?
Yeah. First of all, I don't understand what Stan really is trying to say. I feel that Stan's trying to communicate something, and he's not really saying it. He's saying that children, we have everything, so we shouldn't talk, so our pain's not real.
Let me take a crack at it, because we're just kind of having a minute left. I think he's talking about personal accountability, because he's called into the show before on these types of issues.
Yeah.
And part of the message, and there are people who feel that, is like, listen, you got yourself into this problem, get yourself out of it. And and the feeling of entitlement. Now, does that resonate at all with you?
I hear that. I know that from my experience, number one, the reason why I'm on this show is because I've taken accountability. The fact that I'm here is being honest about it. The fact that Ray's here talking about deep trauma and talking about pain and experience with rehab takes very courageous and takes a lot of bravery. I think that's beautiful, and I think there is so many people our age. And there's people that are older as well, people that are struggling. And I don't think just because of your age that decides of what you know or what you can say or what you can't say, and you never know exactly what someone's going through, and you don't know what someone has or doesn't have. And we can hear to listen to what people have to say and hear from their experience and hear what they went through. And we can also, if we believe something, we can share it and we can talk about it. But I don't think the way to go about it is just telling someone that you have everything, shut your mouth and listen to. I mean, does Stan believe that if we all went Stan's way, then everything would be good? I think Stan, I believe, is a sweetheart. I think that he's a very soft heart, and I think that's why
we're going to have to cut it off there. I also agree that it comes from a good place ultimately. Ray Klein, Yossi Bankalter, thank you so much for being on, talking about this difficult subject. I would like to have you guys on again because there's a lot of interest in this, and this is so important for people to hear. Know that they are not alone. We'll put some support resources in the show notes as well for people dealing with substance abuse and needing help. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.